Our story begins in a small house during a winter blizzard. Inside, a glass lies spilled on the floor. The man explained that the drink was poisoned, and that the poison is now neutralizing the mana channels in the veins. As the man adds that the poison will only last 2 minutes on someone like him. He further reveals that he has mixed various poisons together to ensure its effectiveness. Standing before him is a nobleman, the one who poisoned him, watching as the effects take hold. Our protagonist asks the noble why he would do such a thing. The nobleman replies coldly that he should already know the reason. It is because of the power he possesses. That power, he says, is nothing but a source of uneasiness and will not help unite the empire's future. If they were at war, it might have been different, but in peace, such dangerous strength is unacceptable. He reminds the poisoned man of the words he once spoke, that he would spend the rest of his life quietly in his hometown, without rebellion. The nobleman accuses him of breaking that promise. The poisoned man reflects bitterly. All he ever wanted was to repent for the lives he had taken, for the families he had broken, and for the sins that weighed on him. The nobleman then speaks his name, Ian. He admits that he has always been afraid of Ian. Once his old friend, Ian's power had nearly driven him insane with fear. Ian is an 8th-class magician with the strength to topple kingdoms. A man like that, the noble insists, cannot be allowed to roam free. With heavy words, he begs Ian never to forgive him, no matter what. With that, he leaves the house and sets it ablaze. Inside, Ian, weakened by the poison, anger wells up inside him as he admits to himself that he was careless. But he also thinks that his friend, Regner, had been careless too. From his cloak, Ian pulls out a dagger with a time magic spell embedded within it. Though regret fills him for the life he has lived, he has long been researching a way to undo his mistakes. Staring at the blade, Ian realized that if he strikes at himself before the poison corrupts him, he may be able to use his magic one last time. With thoughts of redemption and a desire to set things right, he strikes at himself with the dagger. The spell activates. He chants his final incantation, a wish to restore everything to its rightful place. His mind floods with memories, the death of his loved one, the years serving the royals, the battles fought, and the bond he once shared with his friend. Then suddenly, Ian awakens as a young boy. Shocked, he touches his chest, searching for wounds, but there is no trace of any wounds. The pain has vanished. Confused, he wonders what happened. A familiar voice calls his name. Turning, he sees his mother who had long since passed away. Stunned, he wonders if he has truly gone back in time, or if he has already died and is meeting her in the afterlife. Looking around, he sees children gathered, knights maintaining order, and the flag of the ivory tower waving above a white tent. It is then that he realizes the truth. He has returned. He has gone back 30 years, to the time before all the mistakes that would one day consume him. The Mana Reaction Test. Within the Green River Empire, this examination is held to identify and nurture magicians who will one day represent the strength of the kingdom. Once children turn 12, it is mandatory for them to take this test. The process consists of 2 phases. The first is the Mana Brain Test, which reveals a person's magical potential. The second is the Mana Heart Test, which determines one's ability to generate and accumulate mana. If a child passes both phases, they are sent to the Magic Academy, and upon graduation, they are granted national authority as official magicians. This tradition had been in place for over 30 years, and for Ian, who had returned to this point in time, it was surreal. Before his death, he had mastered time magic, using the ancient language of dragons, said to be the very foundation of magic itself. Though his original goal was to escape the cycle of war and regret, he realized how deeply he had been betrayed in the past, used by Regner until he was ultimately discarded. Now, given a second chance, Ian vowed that he would not allow such a future to happen again. When his turn for the test arrived, Ian reassured his mother that he would be back soon. As he headed to the testing grounds, he resolved that in order to change everything, he needed to regain the strength of an 8th-class magician, and even surpass it. Upon reaching the entrance, he gave his name to the guard. The guard, smirking, asked if he was Vanessa's son and casually waved him in, reminding him not to bother the magician with unnecessary questions. Ian entered with a flicker of irritation, knowing well the guard's disrespectful nature. Inside the tent, The magician looked weary and asked the knight how many children were left. The knight replied that half a day's worth of candidates remained. The magician sighed, but quickly put on a professional smile as Ian stepped forward. He instructed Ian to lower his head, explaining that he would be stimulating his mind with manna, which could cause temporary dizziness. After the initial check, the magician seemed intrigued and asked Ian to turn around. The results surprised him. Ian possessed a mana brain, and if he also had a mana heart, his entire life could change. Ian, however, knew that merely joining the academy was not enough. He needed to leave a lasting impression. Calmly, he told the magician that he had something to show. Curious, the magician asked what it was. Without hesitation, Ian demonstrated his skill. He summoned fire magic, then immediately followed it with water magic, casting them together in a rare act of double casting. Shock spread through the tent. Both the magician and the knights stared in disbelief, demanding to know who had taught him such techniques. Ian replied honestly that no one had taught him. Suspicious, the magician activated a lie detection spell, warning that if Ian lied, the consequences would be severe. Ian calmly insisted that he spoke the truth, and the spell confirmed his words. The magician was left astonished, wondering what kind of child stood before him. Just then, a commotion erupted outside the tent. Alarmed, Ian rushed out, only to find the guard bothering his mother. The guard spoke rudely, implying she should be grateful for his attention. Ian's anger flared at the sight. The knights came out to inquire about the situation. Seeing them, the guard quickly released her hand and claimed it was nothing. Trying to shift all the blame onto her, he arrogantly said that he was simply teaching a lowly housewife a lesson. Ian grew furious when he heard him call his mother such an insulting name. Just as Ian was about to take action, the magician intervened, telling the guard that moments ago the child had been officially recognized as a magician who met all the requirements. This meant that Ian and his family now held the same authority as nobility. Disrespecting a magician or a noble, the magician explained, was equivalent to challenging the emperor's authority, an offense carrying the gravest of consequences. Realizing the magician's intent, the knights began to draw their swords. The guard, seeing how the situation had turned against him in an instant, fell to his knees before Ian, begging for forgiveness. Ian, however, asked him why he was apologizing to him when there was someone else he needed to face. Understanding the meaning behind his words, the guard immediately turned and knelt before Ian's mother, apologizing for his behavior and pleading for her forgiveness. Confused by the sudden change, Ian's mother looked at her son. Ian then stepped closer to the guard, warning him that he knew about people like him who insulted and disrespected others. He told the guard to spread word of what he had experienced that day and made it clear that he would be keeping a close watch on people like him from now on. The guard quickly nodded and agreed. Once the matter was settled, Ian thanked the magician for stepping in to help. The magician replied that it was their duty to protect fellow magicians. He then assigned Sir Aaron to protect Ian and his family from that day forward. Handing Ian a crystal ball, he explained that he would give him further instructions through it. Accepting the arrangement, Ian and his mother allowed the knight to escort them to the inn where the knights were staying for their safety. On the way, his mother asked if it was true that he had become a magician. Ian confirmed that he had indeed awakened as one. The magician waved them off as they departed, his thoughts heavy. Watching Ian's incredible talent and intelligence at such a young age, he knew that the ivory tower and even the palace would soon be stirred by the news. At night, the same guard who was humiliated earlier walked down the road after drinking heavily. Angry at the boy who used to be just a kitchen helper but now acted so boldly, he muttered to himself about how he would get revenge and make him beg in return. As he stumbled along, someone began following him and suddenly used a paralyze spell. The guard froze in place, shocked and confused about what had just happened. A calm voice told him that he would not be able to move for the time being because of the magic's effect. Terrified, the guard tried to turn his head but could not. The voice continued, asking him what he had said earlier about someone's mother. It was Ian. He reminded the guard that he had already been warned. Ian then described what would happen. A guard, humiliated by the son of a lowly kitchen maid, drowning his shame in alcohol, wandering recklessly, losing his balance on a bridge, and falling into the stream. That would be his fate. Moments later, the guard falls into the water. Ian questioned himself. Was this truly the right thing to do? He had studied time magic to go back, wash away the weight of his past actions, to make better choices. But the illusion had been broken. He realized that to make the right choices, he would still need to walk a difficult path. All he wanted was to protect those precious to him, and for that dream to come true, he would do anything, no matter the cost. Looking in the direction where the guard had fallen, Ian said he would never forgive him, and he would never forgive the one who had poisoned him either. He thought about Ragnar's words and wondered who had influenced him to think that way, though now things seemed clearer. Returning to his resting place, Ian felt drained. His head throbbed in pain, and he reflected on how strange it was that he now struggled to maintain even a simple paralyzed spell. Looking at his small body, he wished he could grow stronger more quickly. When he got back, he saw his mother sleeping peacefully. He remembered how, in his past life, he had been recognized as a first-class mage within a year at the academy, but his mother had died from illness before she could see his success, wealth, or respect. This time, he swore to protect her at all costs and to make her happy. He wanted her to live a long and joyful life. Back then, he had failed to protect anyone, his family, his loved ones, and those dearest to him. Now, he vowed to use this second chance to change everything and shield those he could not save before. Meanwhile, in the capital of the empire, the emperor sat reading a report. Looking up, he asked for opinions on the matter. Herbert Leon, a fifth-class mage and master of the Ivory Tower, replied that nothing could be ruled out yet. Urged by the emperor to continue, Herbert explained that mana flows through a person's very blood, and once someone can control it at will, they are recognized as a magician. Normally, this requires stimulating the mana brain and learning the techniques to manifest magic, just as mages at the academy had done, including himself. But the child in question, he noted, claimed to be self-taught and was already freely wielding first-class magic. This situation reminded him of the very first magician. The first magician appeared a long time ago, and he was the one who discovered adaptability with mana. He manifested magic without being taught by anyone, and his existence became a legend among magicians. The emperor asked if he meant it like a myth, such as the stories of dragons. The mage replied that tales of dragons are illusions and nothing more, but the first mage truly did exist at some point in history. After all, there must always be a beginning before the present can exist. The mage admitted that even he could not fully understand the situation through logic and reasoning alone, and that he would need to see it with his own eyes to confirm it. He explained that the magician dispatched to the area would not lie, as truthfulness is part of his very nature. If the situation had been reported without exaggeration, then the child's potential needed to be acknowledged, as it could also pose danger. That was all he had to say to the emperor. The emperor then asked if the prince was outside the room. After confirmation, the crown prince of the kingdom, Hayden Greenriver, entered and reported to his summons. He inquired about the matter at hand. Recalling his last journey outside the capital over 5 years ago during a patrol in an area suffering from poor harvest, Hayden mentioned he was ready to go out again if necessary. The emperor suggested assigning 300 guards and several third-class mages to accompany him. The emperor then instructed him to travel to Mongolian and bring back a boy named Ian Phage. At first, the prince did not recognize the boy's name, and his hesitation made the emperor consider sending someone else. The emperor reminded him that he had often told him to stay updated on the affairs of the empire and its events. Thinking it might be better to choose another candidate, the emperor spoke his doubts. However, the crown prince quickly insisted that he would handle the mission personally. After some thought, the emperor agreed, telling him to prepare for the long and time-consuming journey. The prince left to make arrangements. The mage then excused himself to prepare as well. When the emperor asked what he needed to prepare, the mage explained that many magicians were reluctant to leave the tower, so he would need to personally convince them. Otherwise, no magician would accompany the prince. The emperor laughed, agreed that he was right, and dismissed him. As the mage left, an attendant asked if he was returning to the tower, but the mage replied that he first had something else to take care of and would make a quick stop on the way. Back in the village, Ian reflected that the empire and the royal family would make their moves sooner or later. Remembering the words of the magician, it was clear to him that he had already been acknowledged as soon as his test was over, and it was almost certain that a report had already reached the higher ranks. This was what Ian had expected from the very beginning. The empire was struggling to find talent to accompany Prince Hayden, and with the leader of the Ivory Tower, Herbert, already supporting the fifth prince, more loyal people would be needed in the tower. This was bound to create conflict between the royal family and the tower. Ian, however, had limitless opportunities. He could choose to join one side, or he could forge his own path. What he would not allow this time was to be manipulated by anyone. Soon after, the magician prepared himself, calling out in a loud voice. He addressed Ian as the Empire's magician and announced that he was being summoned by the king himself. Shocked at hearing the king's direct call, Ian realized the emperor was acting far faster than he had anticipated. Stepping out of his room, he was told that an official command had been issued for him. The magician then instructed Ian on the proper courtesies to observe. As Ian followed along, his composure and posture impressed the magician, who noted that Ian hardly looked like someone doing this for the first time. The message from the king began, declaring Ian as the empire's mage. His talents were recognized, and he was granted the official title of magician, with his name added to the Ivory Tower's records. Furthermore, he was invited to the imperial capital, and the king revealed that his eldest son was already on his way to escort him. Ian instantly grasped the political intent behind the king's words. Once the king's summons ended, a knight stepped forward, introducing himself as Arnold, captain of the Knights of Moglian. He explained that they had been ordered to escort Ian to the lord's castle for safety and preparation. Ian accepted. At the castle, Marcus Moglian, the great lord of the territory, gathered his family and instructed them to treat Ian with the utmost respect. Though Ian was young, his recognition as an imperial mage carried weight, and Marcus knew that anyone capable of attracting the emperor's attention deserved to be welcomed with honor. In the following days, gossip spread among the castle staff. Maids whispered about the boy who could conjure fire with his bare hands, while others remarked that it was no wonder he had been acknowledged as a magician. They were especially impressed by his relentless training, 15 days of continuous practice without pause. As they wondered whether he was still training, Ian was indeed in the practice grounds, focusing his mana. With careful concentration, he cast a Frost Nova spell, covering the entire training area in ice. Looking at the frozen grounds, he reflected on how, in his previous life, he could have frozen an entire castle with ease. His current body was still limited, and he began thinking of ways to overcome his lack of mana. Just then, the head butler arrived in a state of urgency, asking for Ian's help. The lord had gone missing. Surprised, Ian listened as the butler explained that the previous day, Lord Marcus and his son had gone goblin hunting with the knights, but had not returned. Despite using all available manpower, no clues had been found. Ian recalled from his memories of the past that Marcus had indeed died, but it was supposed to happen much later. His early disappearance could mean a dangerous shift in the timeline. The butler further explained that the territory's mage was away on a mission, leaving them with no magical assistance. Ian realized that this absence must be linked to his own presence, likely a result of being reported to the tower. This realization concerned him, for his greatest strength was his knowledge of the future, and any changes in the timeline threatened that advantage. Determined not to let events spiral out of control, Ian decided to cooperate with the search, both to protect Marcus and to preserve the path of history that he knew. Ian prepared to go in search of the Lord when his mother approached him, saying that she knew about the situation. She asked if it was too dangerous for him to go, reminding him that he was still too young for such matters. Ian reassured her that he would be fine since he had become a magician. Though his mother tried to stop him, he promised her that he would return safely. At that moment, the Lord's daughter appeared, crying and begging Ian to find her father and brother. She promised that if he helped, she would grant him anything he desired: money, land, or servants. Ian looked at her, and his attention was caught by the ring on her finger. He promised her that he would bring them back, which made her brighten with hope. Then Ian asked her for a favor, requesting to borrow her ring since he could sense mana flowing from it, believing it would help in locating them. Without hesitation, she handed it over. The moment Ian wore the ring, he felt a surge of mana. It was a familiar sensation from his previous life. This was the Moglian ring, a powerful artifact known for greatly enhancing the mana of its wearer. He wondered why the Lord had given it to his daughter instead of the heir. The daughter, still anxious, reminded Ian that it was a family treasure entrusted to her by her father and urged him again to bring them back safely. Ian assured her not to worry, silently noting that the artifact would help compensate for the mana he currently lacked. With preparations complete, Ian departed with the knights. They soon reached the site where the last traces of the Lord and his party had been found. Ian asked if there had been any casualties, but the knights reported that none of the missing had been discovered, though there was fear they may have fallen to monsters. Around them lay dozens of defeated goblins, and from this, Ian concluded that the attackers had numbered in the hundreds. Determined to find the missing before it was too late, he began his plan. Ian used summoning magic to call forth a wolf spirit. The soldiers grew tense at the thought of what kind of beast might appear, but to their surprise, a small wolf cub emerged, an outcome of Ian's limited mana at his young age. Their expectations were shattered by the sight of the small, almost cute creature, and even Ian recalled that in his previous life, he had summoned a much larger wolf. Still, with his current mana capacity, this was the best he could manage. He instructed the spirit to trace the scent, and the cub immediately began to growl before running off in a direction. Confused, the soldiers looked to Ian, who quickly ordered them to follow. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, goblins had surrounded the Lord and his men. Outnumbered from every direction, the goblins pressed forward, overwhelming them with sheer numbers. Realizing their dire situation, the Lord shouted to his son to run back to the castle and report the threat, while he and the others held the line. Just as he tried to protect his heir, a goblin rushed toward him. Though his men cried out in warning, the goblin was already too close. At that crucial moment, Ian arrived and unleashed the Frost Nova spell. With the immense boost from the Moglian ring, the spell's power was overwhelming, freezing the goblins solid in an instant. The creatures that had been about to strike were now locked deep within the ice. Everyone stood stunned at the sight. Ian calmly stepped into the center of the frozen battlefield. The Lord, upon seeing Ian, finally allowed himself to relax. The fatigue of the battle caught up with him, and he collapsed, trusting in the young magician who had saved them. Back in the Lord's mansion, the Lord finally woke from his deep sleep. His daughter, Margaret, who had stayed by his side the entire time, burst into tears of relief. Slowly, the Lord sat up, trying to recall how he had survived and what had happened. Margaret told him that they had been saved by the magician Ian, and that both he and her brother had been unconscious for 2 days straight. Just then, the butler rushed in, overjoyed to see the Lord awake again. The Lord immediately asked about the others, and the butler reported the casualties suffered during the raid. Hearing this, the Lord then asked to meet the magician personally. Meanwhile, Ian was at the training grounds practicing his magic when the butler arrived and informed him of the Lord's request. Ian confirmed that he had heard the Lord was awake and listened as the butler thanked him sincerely for saving their master. The butler explained that the Lord had something urgent to discuss and requested that Ian meet him in the reception room as soon as possible. When Ian entered, the Lord welcomed him warmly. Ian asked after his condition, and the Lord replied that he was recovering quickly thanks to the care of those around him. He expressed his deep gratitude to Ian for saving both him and his people. The Lord stated that Ian had secured not just their present safety, but also the foundation of their region's future. Since Ian had also cleared the mountain overrun with goblins, the Lord explained that letting such a deed pass without recognition would be disrespectful both to the Empire and to his own position as Grand Lord. The Lord then presented Ian with a box. He explained that he had thought long and hard about this gift before finally deciding. As Ian opened it, the Lord spoke of what he had heard from Margaret, that Ian had detected mana from the ring she lent him. The Lord confessed that he had always considered the ring to be nothing more than a family heirloom, and he asked Ian if it truly had magical value. Ian explained that the ring amplified the magical power of its wearer and added that it had greatly helped him in the battle on the mountain. The Lord was overjoyed to learn this and insisted Ian keep the ring permanently as a gift from his family. When Ian hesitated, the Lord declared that from this day forward, Ian Page would be recognized as the Moglian family's honored guest. The ring would serve as a lasting token of this promise. He swore that Ian would always be welcome in their estate, and that should Ian ever require assistance, the family would stand by him. Swearing on his honor and on the northern streams of the Emerald River, the Lord vowed that this promise would endure for generations. To show their sincerity, both the Lord and his son bowed deeply to Ian. Later, Ian traveled with his escort through the woods. He asked Captain Arnold how far they were from their destination, the town of Lloyd. Arnold reported that once they crossed the next hill, they would see the town ahead. Ian recalled a question he had asked the Lord earlier, whether there were any alchemists skilled in making potions and elixirs. The Lord had mentioned a renowned alchemist named Ridio, who once lived in the capital but had moved north in search of rare herbs. This name was unfamiliar to Ian, as he had never encountered Ridio in his past life. Still, he hoped the man could help him create elixirs to replenish the mana he had spent in recent days. As they neared the hill, the soldiers announced that the town was now in sight. But to their shock, Lloyd was in flames. The soldiers immediately prepared to aid the townspeople. Inside the burning town, raiders were regrouping under their leader's orders. One of them moved to seize a child, intending to leave quickly and retreat to Coldwood. The boy resisted, while his father cried out desperately for his son. A raider cruelly shoved the man aside and threatened him harshly, saying the boy would be taken away. As the boy struggled, fear filled his eyes, until, in a sudden flash, one of the raiders was struck down by a blade of ice. The boy froze in shock, but hope quickly flickered in his gaze. The others quickly noticed the source of the attack. Their eyes widened as they spotted the sky above filled with countless blades of ice. On the mountain stood Ian, casting down a storm of shimmering daggers upon the raiders. Panic spread among them as they tried to flee, but the magical onslaught reached them before they could escape, overwhelming their ranks. From his vantage point, Ian looked down at the village. The results were clear, and he found the outcome satisfactory. Glancing at his ring, Ian judged the immense output he was able to generate with the artifact's help. In his estimation, he already possessed the mana capacity of a third-class magician. Meanwhile, the aftermath in the village was devastating. Many families had suffered deeply from the raid, though the fires were finally extinguished. Ian scanned the scene when Captain Arnold approached him. Ian asked if there were any casualties among the soldiers. The captain, still shaken by the power Ian had displayed earlier, hesitated before replying. He reported that none of the soldiers had been harmed, as Ian's swift actions had left them with no risky tasks to perform. Relieved, Ian turned his attention to the true reason for his journey, whether the people he had come for had survived. Not far away, Ian heard someone calling out to Ridio. Recognizing the name, he turned and saw a villager supporting a weak man, his young son by his side. Ridio looked pale, his hair unnaturally white despite his age, and he seemed to be in great pain. Ian stepped closer and asked permission to examine him. Based on the symptoms, Ian suspected mana poisoning, a dreaded condition also called the God's Curse. He explained to himself that mana poisoning occurred when a person with a mana brain but no mana heart was infused with energy. Unable to properly circulate and release the power, mana would build up in the body, overstimulating the brain and causing unbearable pain that lingered endlessly. Ian concluded that Ridio had not done this to himself. Judging by his condition, a magician must have forcefully injected mana into him. Despite knowing how grave the situation was, Ian placed his hand on Ridio's head. Using the method he knew, he carefully injected pure mana while simultaneously releasing the excess trapped inside. Slowly, Ridio's expression eased as the pain temporarily subsided. Ian instructed the others to tend to his physical wounds, and they thanked him with relief. The boy approached Ian with teary eyes, asking if his father would be all right. Ian replied truthfully. His father would be fine for now, but there was no permanent cure. The boy, alarmed, asked if his father's pain would return. Ian nodded and explained that, over time, the mana would build up again, and Ridio would eventually face a difficult choice: repeated treatments or the risk of death. Hearing this, the boy was shaken to his core and began to cry. Through his tears, the boy declared that he would find the rare Lander's flower to create a cure for his father. With determination, he suddenly ran toward the forest. A villager shouted after him, calling his name, Douglas. Hearing that name, Ian froze for a moment. He recalled from his past life that Douglas Hammond was destined to become the greatest alchemist in history. Once a child born into slavery, later rising to stand at the side of Emperor Ragnar himself due to his unmatched talent and brilliance. But in Ian's memories, Douglas Hammond had always harbored a deep hostility toward magicians. Now connecting the dots, Ian realizes that an alchemist suffering from mana poisoning because of a magician and the mention of a rare herb in the north cannot be a coincidence. If the rumors are true about this herb being able to neutralize mana within the body, then the poison he once consumed in his past life may have been connected to it. With that realization, Ian casts haste magic and leaps ahead of the running boy. He warns him that raiders are still outside the village and the area remains dangerous. The boy, however, cries and insists he cannot wait. He explains that if he fails to create a cure for his father soon, his father will continue to suffer and eventually die. Seeing that the boy refuses to listen, Ian gently uses magic to put him to sleep. He places the child under a tree and looks at him carefully. In that moment, Ian notices that the boy's expression, though fierce, mirrors the same determination he remembers from Douglas's childhood face. He reflects on the future he once knew and how he has already altered it. If Ian had not intervened, this village would have been destroyed, the boy's father killed by raiders, and the boy himself reduced to slavery. Ian recalls the strange poison from his past life, one that neutralized mana. He suspects that it must have been created by this very boy in the future. Driven by ambition, Douglas would one day craft a substance that was both a cure and a poison. Ian believes that Douglas knowingly produced this, fully aware of Ragnar's plan to use it against him, and still delivered it. Considering this, Ian wonders if it would be better to remove the boy before he grows into the man who will eventually betray him. But he quickly dismisses the thought. Acting hastily could cause greater problems, especially since this child has the talent to become the greatest alchemist in the world. The key, Ian decides, is to bring him over to his side. Yet even then, there is no guarantee that Douglas will not betray him in the future. As Ian is lost in thought, someone calls out to him. It is Captain Arnold, who approaches and remarks that Ian disappeared without a word. The captain notices the boy and asks about him. Ian explains that the child was about to do something reckless, so he put him to sleep for his own safety. He requests that the captain take the boy back to the village. When asked if he will be joining them, Ian shakes his head and replies that he has something else to take care of. Without further explanation, he turns and disappears into the forest. At night in the village, inside their home, Ridio, who has recovered slightly, asks his son if he is asleep and feeling better. The boy, still upset, says he is awake. Ridio gently reminds him that the villagers told him how the magician and soldiers saved them earlier, and that he also tried to do something reckless again by sneaking out without telling anyone. The boy tries to excuse himself, saying he was only looking for a flower. Ridio firmly tells him that with raiders near the village, they may be attacked again, so it is foolish to act that way. Hearing this, Douglas stands up in worry and asks what he should do when even the magician admitted that his father would continue to suffer in the future. Ridio reassures him, saying he will find a cure once he gets his hands on the flower. But Douglas begins to cry, explaining that he has searched for that flower for over a year without finding it. He questions if the flower even exists. Suddenly, a voice from the door interrupts, saying the flower does exist. Shocked, both father and son look toward the door, wondering who could know about their secret conversation. Ridio cautiously asks who is there. Ian answers, saying he heard they were searching for the lander flower. Ridio opens the door, and Ian steps inside, removing his hood. Douglas immediately recognizes him as the magician who saved them earlier. Ian introduces himself and places a block of ice on the table. Ridio peers at it closely and realizes with astonishment that inside the ice is none other than the lander flower, the very flower they had been desperately searching for. Ian explains that the flower is preserved in the ice. He tells them he is willing to give it to them, but first wants to know how they learned about its effects when it is considered unknown to most. After hesitating, Ridio admits that he read about it in a journal passed down from his father. He brings out a worn book marked with many notes and opens it to a bookmark page. He explains that it describes a flower with 12 petals capable of neutralizing mana within the body. According to the journal, the flower grows only in the northern continent. A detailed diagram is included, along with notes explaining that the flower instantly dries up once picked, making farming or long-term preservation impossible. Ian then asks if Ridio's father was also an alchemist. Ridio nods, saying alchemy has always been a family trade, and the journal is nearly a family treasure. Ian warns them that while the flower may help those without a mana heart, to a magician with both a mana brain and mana heart, the flower's ability to neutralize mana makes it a deadly poison. The hints are enough for Ridio, who quickly understands Ian's point. He firmly insists, however, that no one in his family has ever created potions to harm others. Ian studies Douglas closely, suspecting that in the future this very child will become the one to create the poison that once ended his life. Clearing the air, Ian thanks them for their answers, but apologizes as he picks up the block of ice and melts it. The flower instantly withers away. He explains that he has yet to find a way to preserve it properly. Freezing only kept its shape temporarily. Ridio, surprised, asks if Ian tricked him. Ian calmly replies that he only wanted to prove the flower truly exists. Ian then makes an offer. He asks if Ridio is willing to work for him. In return, Ian promises to inject him with controlled mana to ease the effects of his illness, as well as help find a way to preserve and use the lander flower. Ian reasons that working together may also uncover knowledge that, in the future, fell into Ragnar and Douglas's hands. He invites them both to join him in the capital. Ridio hesitates and asks what exactly would be required of him. Ian explains that he needs mana elixirs and also hopes Ridio can help him find a cure for his ailing mother. Ridio questions if Ian should not instead seek out a more skilled alchemist. But Ian shakes his head and says he needs someone reliable who can stay close and supply him consistently. To add weight to his offer, he reminds Ridio how Douglas ran into the forest filled with raiders just to find a cure. He tells him to make his decision for the sake of his child as well. Realizing that Ian is far from an ordinary boy, Ridio begins to suspect there is more to him than he lets on. Still, he asks for time to think. Ian agrees, saying they may take as long as they need. As he leaves, Ian glances back at the father and son. In his mind, he vows that this time the boy will not lose his father, will not become a slave, and his talent will never fall into the hands of someone as cruel as Ragnar. The very next morning in the village, Ian walks through the houses, observing the situation. Captain Arnold arrives and reports that preparations to return to the Lord's castle are complete. Ian sighs and glances at Douglas's house. Seeing no response, he starts planning for their return, wondering if Ridio has not made his decision yet. Suddenly, both father and son step out of the house. Douglas calls out to Ian, and Ian asks Ridio if they have made their decision. Ridio replies that there was never much of a choice to begin with. He must live first before doing anything else. Closing the distance, he asks Ian to keep his word, and Ian agrees. Curious, Douglas asks if Ian can really cure his father. Ian, touched by the boy's innocence unlike the man he knew in another life, smiles and says that he has promised to try his best. Douglas's face lights up with excitement, and he asks if he can call Ian his captain. Surprised, Ian hesitates but eventually nods. Douglas happily begins calling him captain. Ian silently reflects on how, in another life, Douglas had treated him like trash and dismissed him without a second thought. He wonders if he is really dealing with the same person. Just then, a soldier rushes in and urgently tells Ian that he must return immediately. Startled by the panic, Ian asks what has happened. The soldier explains that the prince has already crossed the Gamas River and is heading toward the castle. Shocked at how quickly this has happened, Ian asks why they weren't informed sooner. The soldier admits they only received the message that morning. Ian requests a horse. When asked if he can ride, Ian approaches the animal and calmly says he cannot ride it, but he can be its friend. Using magic, he tames the horse and asks if it can take him to the castle. The horse lowers itself, offering Ian a chance to climb on. In haste, Ian orders Captain Arnold to bring Ridio with them and says he will go ahead first. With that, Ian rides away from the town. Meanwhile, in a carriage elsewhere, the prince sits deep in thought. Before his departure, the emperor had summoned him and shared important news. Herbert, the head of the ivory tower, was meeting with the fifth prince. The emperor warned that many nobles follow the ivory tower's master, and his allegiance could greatly shift the balance of influence. From the looks of it, Herbert was siding with the fifth prince this time. The emperor reminded the crown prince that the fifth prince was highly capable and intelligent, and would surely gather talented people to his side. That is why the Crown Prince's mission was clear. He must secure Ian Phage's loyalty before the ivory tower reached him. In other words, the Emperor wanted Ian under the Crown Prince's banner to strengthen his base of power. In the carriage, the prince scoffs to himself, wondering how much help a child could really be. He bitterly reflects on how no mage from the ivory tower stands with him. Arrogantly, he questions how the tower's master could abandon him for his younger brother, and secretly vows to remove them once he ascends to the throne. At the same time, the second captain, Oliver Raywood, suggests informing the Northern Lord of their early arrival. The prince refuses. Oliver tries to persuade him, pointing out that the Lord deserves some time to prepare for the royal visit. The arrogant prince dismisses him, saying that as a member of the Northern Moglian Lord's family, the captain should know better. The prince then asks how much longer until they reach their destination. Oliver replies that they will arrive in 2 days. With a smug expression, the prince orders him to send a message ahead, saying he wants to see how the Defender of the North and the Shield of the Empire will prepare for his arrival on such short notice. Annoyed by the prince's immaturity, Captain Oliver nonetheless agrees and says he will send the message immediately. Back at the Northern Lord's castle, the atmosphere was tense and bustling due to the prince's early arrival. The Lord himself oversaw preparations, ensuring everything was arranged properly for the prince's stay. He carefully checked the halls, watched over the servants, and even dusted areas himself. At first, he thought the prince would not come, since no word had reached them. Calling his butler, he asked if the other noble families had arrived. The butler reported that all had gathered except for 2 families still en route to the castle. The Lord then inquired about the young magician, wondering if Ian had returned from his journey. But there was still no news. Concern grew as the timing seemed too critical to leave things uncertain. Despite the lack of confirmation, the Lord decided they would wait outside to receive the prince. Before long, the guards announced that the crown prince had arrived. The carriage rolled in, and the prince stepped out, immediately drawing the attention of everyone present. At that moment, one of the other lords asked about the magician, emphasizing his importance. Suddenly, a horse raced forward with incredible speed, and atop it was Ian. The nobles and families turned, surprised to see the young mage whose reputation had already spread. His unique way of arriving caught everyone's eye. The Northern Lord welcomed Ian and informed him that by royal order he must stand at the highest place of honor. The prince then stepped closer, asking if he was truly Ian Phage. Ian studied the prince's face, one he had not seen in a long time. His gaze then shifted to the magicians accompanying the prince. Among them, he immediately recognized Cecilia, a spy from the Coldwood Empire. Later, in the banquet hall, Captain Oliver tried to prevent the prince from drinking too much. The prince, however, complained arrogantly that there was nothing worthwhile at the castle except the wine. He grumbled about dealing with nobles after traveling so far, finding the banquet tasteless and the company boring. He expressed his desire to return to his chambers instead of entertaining others. Meanwhile, Cecilia, the spy from Coldwood, thought carefully about her mission. She had been ordered by her empire to observe Ian, confirm the truth behind the rumors, and, if necessary, capture him and his mother to bring them back. Even if her nation risked losing a spy, their interest in Ian was so great that they were willing to make the sacrifice. She wondered what kind of person he truly was to cause such turmoil and attract the attention of empires. Deciding to investigate further, she later found Ian in the training grounds. Watching him, she considered testing his abilities to see if the rumors were true. Without warning, she cast a magic missile toward him. Ian calmly raised a barrier and blocked the attack. Narrowing his eyes, he asked who she was. Maintaining her cover, Cecilia introduced herself as a magician from the ivory tower and claimed it was just a greeting. Ian replied sarcastically, asking if she always greeted people by attacking them. She tried to intimidate him, saying that seniors could play harmless pranks on juniors, so he shouldn't take offense. Before she could continue, Ian interrupted her by speaking her real name, Cecilia Coldwalker. Shocked, she demanded to know how he could possibly know that. Ian told her that he knew far more than just her name. In fact, he knew her history very well. He remembered how, in his past life, he had slain all the Coldwalkers who infiltrated the Empire. He even offered to recite their names if she wanted proof. Trying to regain control, Cecilia mocked him, asking how someone like him could know such things. But to her horror, Ian began listing the names and ranks of spies from the Coldwood Empire, exposing details only an insider could know. He mocked her further, pointing out the traits they all shared. This enraged Cecilia. She warned him that even if he knew the truth, he should have remained silent. Furious, she summoned a fireball infused with immense mana and hurled it at him. The explosion filled the area with smoke and flame. Certain she had killed him, she waited for the dust to settle. But when the smoke cleared, Ian stood unharmed. Calmly, he said he already knew she was a cold walker. Realization hit Cecilia, and she asked why he had come alone if he was aware of her true identity. She wondered if this boy had truly blocked an attack intended to kill him instantly. Ian stepped forward, preparing his own spell. He told her he had known she would come to find him in the training grounds, exactly as he had planned. Startled by his foresight, Cecilia looked up as the smoke faded. Above her, the sky was filled with countless daggers made of ice, leaving no room for escape. Ian's voice rang out, cold and certain. Everything was unfolding exactly as he had expected. After Ian displayed his power by summoning countless ice spears across the sky aimed at Cecilia, he launched them all simultaneously. Shocked by the immense talent and strength of the boy, Cecilia instantly realized she had gravely underestimated him, and now she was in serious trouble. To protect herself, she quickly deployed a mana barrier. However, even with her skill and vast mana reserves, the barrier struggled against the overwhelming pressure of Ian's attacks. At the same time, Ian conjured a blazing fireball using pyro magic and hurled it towards Cecilia amidst the barrage of ice spears. Realizing her barrier would not last, and that she would be struck down if she remained stationary, since a mana barrier prevents movement, Cecilia took a desperate gamble. She released the barrier and ran, trying to escape the radius of the fireball. As she fled, the ice spears grazed her body, leaving scratches. The fireball exploded, and although battered, Cecilia narrowly survived. Breathing heavily, she convinced herself that Ian must have exhausted his mana. Believing that others would soon arrive due to the explosion, she thought she had secured victory. After all, as someone trusted by the tower, no one would suspect her over a random boy. All she needed now was to heal and deal with him later. But just as she was reassuring herself, Ian approached, showing no signs of fatigue. Calmly, he told her he intended to make a name for himself by exposing her. With a grin, Cecilia asked if he truly believed he could. Ian replied with confidence, saying his plan would work, and that he possessed proof even she was unaware of. When she demanded to know what he was talking about, soldiers suddenly arrived at the scene. The magicians rushed to Cecilia's side, shocked at her injuries, and questioned what had happened. Remaining silent, Cecilia hesitated. Ian then stepped forward, claiming responsibility for her condition. His words caught everyone's attention, and the knights pressed him to explain. Acting innocent, Ian said he had stumbled upon Cecilia speaking with a masked stranger, and that she had attacked him without warning. Forced to defend himself, he fought back. When asked if he had proof, Ian mentioned he had seen them examining marks on their bodies. Hearing this, the knight captain ordered Cecilia to be checked for such a mark. The magicians protested, offended at the very idea, but the captain silenced them, reminding them that the royal prince was present and that knights had a duty to uncover the truth. Despite objections, female knights searched Cecilia, but found nothing. The magicians demanded she be healed immediately, accusing the knights of insulting the ivory tower. The captain turned to Ian, asking if he had lied. Ian shook his head and calmly stepped closer to Cecilia. As she flinched, he placed mana on her back. To everyone's shock, a glowing seal appeared. Cecilia, stunned, demanded to know what he had done. Ian feigned innocence, saying he had simply revealed what she and the masked man had been looking for earlier. He explained that members of the Cold Walkers were always branded with such marks when sent to their training schools. Only their handlers knew of them, and it had taken Ian a year of interrogating one to uncover the truth. The captain asked if the magicians knew about the mark, but even they admitted it was their first time seeing it. When asked about its meaning, Ian withheld the full explanation. The captain, however, declared that regardless of its purpose, the mark was undeniable evidence supporting Ian's claims. He ordered Cecilia to be healed and confined in a mana prison for interrogation. Humiliated, the magicians complied. The captain then turned to Ian and told him that if his claims proved true, the emperor himself would reward him. Now in the prince's chambers, the prince, after receiving the knight's report of the incident, asked if it was true that the boy had defeated a third-class magician of the ivory tower all by himself. The prince seemed surprised at such talent. The knight captain confirmed that he had seen Ian after the battle and that the report was indeed accurate. The prince admitted he had not expected the boy to be so skilled. Surprised and now re-evaluating him, he asked the captain for his opinion about Ian. The captain replied that the message sent earlier by the dispatched magician appeared to be true. The way Ian spoke and carried himself was far from ordinary for a child. The prince thought for a moment before saying he wished to meet Ian personally and judge for himself. He instructed Captain Oliver to bring the boy before him. Before long, Ian bowed respectfully before the prince, saying he was answering the royal summons. The prince told Ian that he had heard about the spy from Coldwood among the magicians, noting that she had been considered one of the talented ones. He expressed that Ian's achievement in exposing her had impressed him greatly. Ian replied humbly, saying he was honored by the prince's words. The prince then declared that he would like to reward Ian for his accomplishments and asked if there was anything he desired. Ian, understanding that the prince was evaluating him through this request, carefully considered what to ask for. He decided to choose something that seemed simple to the prince but was valuable to himself. With a childlike gesture, Ian asked if he could visit the old ruins of the ivory tower on their way back to the imperial capital. The prince raised an eyebrow, questioning why he would want to see such ruins, as there was little of value left there. Ian, feigning innocence, explained with excitement that he had heard stories about the place and had always wanted to visit at least once. The prince, surprised by the modest request, thought to himself that perhaps Ian truly was still a child at heart. Amused, he agreed to take him there. Ian smiled, pleased, thinking that he might obtain what he wanted much sooner than expected. Hidden deep within the ruins of the old ivory tower was a treasure, the Book of Dragon Language. In his past life, Ian had obtained it only a few years before his death, far too late to study its secrets fully. The book contained the essence of time magic and many other advanced spells. Now, he believed, with the book in his hands at an earlier stage of life, he would be able to unlock far greater knowledge. Later, as the prince's carriage carried Ian and his companions, Ian's mother gazed outside with a glowing smile. It was her first time traveling so far from home. She asked Ian something cheerfully, and seeing her happiness, Ian nodded with a smile of his own. At that moment, Ridio spoke up, telling her that once they reached the imperial capital, he would gladly guide her around, as he had already lived there while working as an alchemist. He spoke in a tone meant to impress her. At the same time, Douglas glanced at his father and felt uneasy. Ian's mother thanked him politely for his offer, while Ian looked at him, silently thinking about the audacity of such behavior. The second Imperial Knight, Paul, the vice-captain, informed Ian that they had reached their destination. Upon arriving at the ruins of the old ivory tower, Paul explained that they would be staying for 2 days, and, by the order of the Crown Prince, Ian was free to explore the area as he pleased. He then guided everyone to their lodgings. In the nearby town, the townsfolk gathered to greet the prince, expressing their joy and delight at his visit. They said it was an honor not only for them, but for their future generations as well. The prince, relaxed among the commoners, reassured them that it was nothing special. Watching this, Ian thought to himself that the prince treated civilians in a humane way, unlike what he remembered from his past life. Back then, the crown prince always carried a dark and hostile expression, influenced by the constant presence of the fifth prince, Ragnar. Now, seeing how at ease he was with ordinary people rather than nobles and royalty, Ian understood why the emperor favored the crown prince over the others. Douglas approached Ian and asked when they would visit the tower ruins. Curious, Ian asked why he was so interested. Douglas explained that he wanted to accompany him. Ian sighed, thinking he needed to complete his own tasks quickly at dawn before joining the others. He told Douglas they would visit together the next morning. Douglas looked at him with wide, hopeful eyes and asked again if they would truly go together. Overwhelmed by this unusually cheerful version of Douglas, Ian wondered if he was really the same person he once knew. He eventually agreed, and Douglas smiled with genuine joy. Ridio, noticing how much his son seemed to like Ian, quietly called Vanessa over and told her he wanted to ask something. Once he had her attention, he asked if Ian had always been so mature, as he found it hard to believe that he was only 12 years old. Vanessa explained that Ian had matured far too quickly for his age, but deep down he was still a caring and kind-hearted boy, just like his father once was. She added that, although Ian never admitted it, she knew he felt an emptiness where his father should have been, and that he tried to fill that void on his own. Her words carried sadness at the hardships her son had endured. Ridio then asked if Ian's father had also been a magician. Vanessa shook her head and explained that her husband, Fran, had been an ordinary man. Before Ian was born, he disappeared one day while going to work as usual. She revealed that his cane mysteriously returned after 5 years. She began to continue the story but suddenly stopped, bringing the conversation to an end. Ian looked back on the days when he wandered endlessly, following the wind and the stars. After the War of Unification, he had fled from the Ivory Tower and the Emperor. Thinking back, he wondered whether it had been a coincidence that he entered the ruins of the old Ivory Tower, or if perhaps something had guided him there. Now, standing once more before the same place that had shaped so much of his fate, Ian gazed at the ruins of the old Ivory Tower and was struck by how unchanged they seemed. According to history, around 300 years ago, there had been a great war between the magicians of the Ivory Tower and a race known as the Dragonians, who claimed to be the descendants of dragons. The Dragonians, alongside their gargoyle army, were powerful enough to threaten the empire itself. However, the tide turned when an imperial prince and a high-class magician named Mitchell Green River appeared, leading other magicians into battle. Their combined efforts brought victory, resulting in the extinction of the gargoyles and restoring peace. Mitchell Green River, despite his power, refused the position of emperor. Instead, he chose to build a new tower and become its master, leaving the old tower abandoned. Walking deeper into the ruins, Ian searched for something. At last, he found the spot he remembered. Channeling his magic, he revealed a hidden pathway leading underground. Descending into the pitch darkness, he cast a light spell to illuminate his surroundings. The chamber contained a pedestal with a statue resembling a gargoyle. Ian recalled how, in his previous life, he had been shocked to discover this very statue. As he stared at it, the stone cracked, and the gargoyle came to life. This time, Ian was prepared. He knew this would happen. Back then, he had never imagined that a supposedly extinct creature would be hiding in such a place. The gargoyle lunged at him, but Ian countered with a surge of water magic, slamming the beast against the wall. Focused, he prepared for the next move. In his past life, as an 8th-class magician, he had defeated such monsters with ease. But now, with his limited strength, the battle was far more difficult. The gargoyle rose again and attacked. Anticipating this, Ian summons Ice Spear and strikes it towards the monster, then followed up with a burst of lightning magic that finally brought it down. With the path now clear, Ian pressed onward. Using a spell to soften his landing, he leapt down into the depths of the ruins. There, at last, he found what he had been seeking, the dragon language scroll resting on a table. Smiling, he whispered that they had met again much sooner than in his previous life. As he studied the book, he wondered who could have hidden it, the first magician, perhaps, or the dragons themselves. The dragon language had once been beyond his full understanding, even in his past life. This time, he was determined to grasp more of its secrets. But when he opened the book, he was stunned to find its pages blank. Confused, Ian realized the reason. The book was empty because he had already used it when he returned to the past. Regret filled him as he thought that if only he had studied it more carefully before, he might have gained greater knowledge. He tried to recall and speak the incantations he once learned from the book, but the words no longer came to him. Shocked, he understood why. The dragon language was not spoken by voice alone, but through mana itself. And once erased from the flow of time, it could no longer be used. This meant he could no longer wield time magic or turn back the clock. The possibility of reliving his life again and again was gone. Though he regretted the outcome, he also accepted that at least he had learned this truth before making any rash decisions. Now, his second life had become heavier, for he could not regress again. The group was nearing the capital of the empire when the escorts reported their imminent arrival. Soon, they entered the bustling city, filled with trade and transportation. People could be seen working tirelessly, attending to their businesses, and the lively atmosphere surrounded them on all sides. For Ian, returning to the capital after many years brought a wave of nostalgia. Still, he reminded himself to remain cautious. His greatest concern was Cecilia. If she encountered anyone connected to the Cold Walkers, she might reveal things that could contradict what he had told others. He wanted to avoid drawing unnecessary attention, and based on his past encounters with her, he suspected she would speak up as soon as someone approached her. If that happened too soon, it could complicate everything for him. Just as he was deep in thought, their path was suddenly blocked by magicians of the Ivory Tower, led by their master. The captain halted the procession, dismounted, and demanded an explanation for obstructing the crown prince's route. The mage replied that they were acting under the emperor's orders, presenting official documents that granted them authority over Cecilia and related matters, which were to be handled by the Ivory Tower. The captain objected, pointing out that they already had the paperwork concerning the spy before she was even brought to the capital. The mage dismissed this concern, stating that sensitive matters were best handled as early as possible. He reassured the captain to rest easy, insisting the tower would take responsibility from this point forward. The captain grew visibly upset but, bound by imperial orders, instructed the knights to hand Cecilia over to the tower. At this, the mage sternly corrected him, warning that Cecilia was not to be called a sinner, as she was still recognized as a mage of the tower. The knights, angered by the situation, resented the fact that after all their efforts, the Ivory Tower was taking her away so casually. Yet, orders from the emperor were absolute, and they had no choice but to comply. Ian quickly realized the truth. The magicians were not protecting Cecilia out of loyalty. Instead, they wanted to prevent the knights from interrogating her and uncovering information that might expose secrets of the tower. He understood that they would lock her away in the deepest prison within the tower, burying the entire spy incident regardless of whether she was truly connected to the Coldwood Empire or not. Escape from such a prison would be impossible. Amidst the tension, Ian's mother grew worried, but he gently reassured her that there was no need for concern. In a way, this development had resolved one of his problems indirectly. Shortly after, Ian was informed they would be making a stop along the way. Before long, they arrived at a grand mansion. As Ian gazed at it, he was struck by a memory. This very mansion had once been granted to him when he reached 5th class in his previous life. Back then, it had been Regner who bestowed it upon him. As he reflected on this, the crown prince approached and asked Ian if he liked the place. He then revealed that the emperor himself had granted this mansion to Ian. Surprised, Ian bowed deeply, expressing his gratitude and declaring his eternal debt. The prince reassured him that there was no need to worry. Ian thought back to his previous life, when he had received this mansion at the age of 26. Now, at only 12 years old, he had gained it 14 years earlier than before. Looking around, he couldn't help but think how splendid the mansion was, both then and now. The prince told Ian that his family would stay in the mansion while Ian would accompany him to the imperial palace to meet the emperor, since they had finally arrived in the capital. Ian hesitated for a moment, then asked if he could first look around the mansion with his mother. Amused by what seemed like a childish request, the prince allowed it. Ian thanked him and went inside. The mansion was lavish, every part of it radiating elegance. His mother looked around in awe, clearly surprised. Ian, who in his previous life had never been able to provide her with such a home, watched her carefully and asked how she liked it. She seemed confused at first, so Ian explained that this would be their new home from now on. Shocked, she stared at him. In his last life, she had passed away before he could bring her to such a place, so this moment carried deep meaning for him. Impressed, his mother softly muttered that this mansion looked like a place where true nobles lived, even grander than the lord's castle. Ian, who had long dreamed of seeing her acknowledge his success, grew impatient for her reaction. No matter what he had earned before, he had not been able to share it with her. Determined, he told her this mansion was meant for royals, and that he would make sure she lived the life she truly deserved. He asked again what she thought, waiting eagerly for the response he had longed for. Finally, She smiled and said the mansion was gorgeous and enormous, but then added with concern, how was she supposed to clean such a huge place? After waiting decades for this moment, Ian was left speechless by her unexpected reaction. His mind went blank, and he called out to her in disbelief. She, puzzled, asked what was wrong with him so suddenly. Ian swore then and there that he would ensure she never had to worry about housework again. After this roller coaster of emotions, Ian accompanied the prince to the imperial palace. Dressed formally, he stood nervously outside the emperor's chamber. He had never met the emperor before and wondered what kind of man he truly was. In his past life, by the time Ian graduated and stepped into the wider world, the emperor had already been on his deathbed. All Ian had ever heard was praise of the ruler's wisdom and decisiveness. He hoped that now, perhaps, he could learn directly from him. As they walked through the palace, Ian glanced out a window toward the residence of the fifth prince. He wondered what that son of a concubine, Regner, was doing now. Regner resembled the emperor in appearance, but unlike his benevolence, Regner had been cold-hearted. He was both Ian's old friend and his greatest enemy. Ian thought carefully about what he would do when their paths inevitably crossed in this life. At last, Ian was escorted into the emperor's chamber. The grand doors opened, and he stepped inside to meet the ruler of the empire. Ian entered the king's chamber as the doors opened with the announcement of his arrival. The emperor sat upon his throne, radiating authority, while the crown prince stood respectfully by his side. Ian bowed deeply and greeted the emperor with humble words, acknowledging his lowly position before such a ruler. The emperor told him to raise his head, addressing Ian as the hero of the North and praising how much he had accomplished in such a short time. He expressed his appreciation for Ian's efforts. Ian thanked him sincerely for his kind words. The emperor then told him not to strain himself with etiquette, as he understood Ian had not grown up in royal surroundings where such manners were taught. What he had shown was more than enough, and he instructed him to stand at ease. Hearing those words about manners, Ian was reminded of Ragnar, who had spoken in the same way when they first met in his past life. The emperor then asked how Ian found the mansion he had bestowed upon him, one of the royal residences personally granted. As soon as the emperor mentioned the mansion, the crown prince, standing nearby, waved at Ian like a friend. Ian replied that the mansion was far grander than anything he could have imagined, though inwardly he wondered why the prince was acting so casually in front of the emperor. The emperor, cutting through Ian's formal words, asked him directly whether he truly liked it or not. Ian answered clearly that he did, adding that his mother was very happy there. The emperor was pleased with this reply, recognizing maturity in Ian's choice of words and how he tried not to focus on himself. Then the emperor asked if Ian knew why he had been brought there by the crown prince himself, and why he had been granted the mansion immediately upon arrival. Ian, understanding the weight of the question, debated whether to answer directly. He recalled how Ragnar in his previous life had valued honesty and straightforwardness, and since the emperor was said to be similar in that regard, it was likely he preferred the same. However, Ian decided against being too direct yet. After all, he was only 12 years old in this life, and needed to act accordingly until he achieved his goals. Choosing instead to show a childish side, Ian replied that the emperor was kind to him because he was a little more talented than others, something he had heard people say about his magic. The emperor, taken aback by this unexpected reply, pressed further, asking if Ian truly believed talent was the only reason. The weight of the question put pressure on Ian, and the crown prince noticed his unease. Seeing his friend in turmoil, the crown prince intervened, saying Ian was still just a child. How much could he truly understand at his age? The emperor was surprised, as this was the first time his son had openly protected someone in the palace. Deciding it was best to support the heir, the emperor agreed, saying it was true. He accepted Ian's explanation and added that the reports from knights and magicians alike praised his work. He had even heard about Ian's role in exposing a spy from another nation. The emperor continued, saying that Ian had contributed greatly to the empire and must therefore be rewarded for his efforts. He asked Ian directly if there was anything he wished for. This was the opportunity Ian had been waiting for. He had thought carefully about it beforehand, knowing that as a child he could ask for things that might seem ordinary but still give him an advantage. Smiling, Ian requested that he be allowed to look around. The emperor was astonished by such a modest and curious choice of words. Ian said that he wanted to freely roam around the palace and later tell his mother about what he had seen there, the beauty of the royal palace and how magnificent it was, just like in the stories. Hearing this, the crown prince added that Ian had also wished to visit the old ruins of the ivory tower earlier. The prince remarked that Ian was a curious child, fitting for his age, and suggested to the emperor that his wish should be granted. The emperor, after hearing their words, allowed Ian possession of a seal. An attendant presented the seal to him, and the emperor explained that with it, Ian could go almost anywhere in the palace. He also told him that if he ever needed guidance, he could simply show the seal, and someone would assist him. The emperor then asked if that was truly all Ian wanted. Ian humbly replied, asking what else he could possibly desire. At this, the emperor said he would reward Ian in his own way and ordered attendants to bring forth more gifts. Ian was presented with a chest full of gold, along with the service of a maid from the palace who would be assigned to his mansion to help maintain it, ensuring he and his family could live comfortably. Ian, seeing this, thought to himself that at least now his mother would no longer need to worry about cleaning the mansion. He thanked the emperor for his generosity. After leaving the chamber, Ian reflected on the encounter. The emperor seemed different from many others Ian had met in his past life. Rather than admiration, he had sensed suspicion from the emperor. Still, he knew this might be the way the emperor treated everyone he met, similar to Ragnar, who always said that fear was fundamental to ruling. With the seal now in his possession, Ian decided to visit a place he had long wanted to see. He went toward what seemed to be a garden, but a guard on duty stopped him and asked what had brought him there. Ian showed the seal and explained that the emperor had instructed him to present it. Surprised by the sight of the seal, the guard quickly offered to guide him. Using this as a pretext for exploring the palace, Ian wandered until he reached the Empire's sanctuary. Memories stirred within him. He recalled how Ragnar had once taken him there, saying it was a place only royalty could enter, and promising to bring Ian along once he became one himself. Inside, Ian noticed that most guards stood watch with keen eyes, but one seemed to be asleep on duty. To be cautious, Ian quietly cast a sleep spell over him. Then, using a ball of light magic to illuminate his way, Ian searched the sanctuary, wondering if what he sought was near the first emperor's tomb. After a long search, he finally discovered the very thing he had been looking for,